There are moments in life when your heart becomes so tired that even hope feels heavy. You wake up each morning already carrying pressure inside your chest before the day even begins. You try to stay strong. You try to keep believing that things will improve soon. But after enough disappointment, enough sleepless nights, enough silent battles that nobody else fully understands, something inside you slowly begins to weaken. Not outwardly. Inside. Deep inside. The kind of exhaustion that people cannot easily see. Because you still continue moving through life. You still answer people when they speak to you. You still handle responsibilities. You still smile sometimes so nobody asks too many questions. But secretly, there are nights where you sit alone feeling emotionally overwhelmed by everything you have been carrying for so long. And maybe lately, life has felt especially heavy for you. Maybe you have been quietly fighting fear about the future. Maybe you have been carrying financial pressure, emotional pain, loneliness, heartbreak, uncertainty, or disappointment that nobody truly knows about. Maybe you keep praying for change while heaven feels painfully silent. And after a while, silence begins to scare you. Because silence makes you wonder things you never wanted to question. God, do you still see me? Will things ever truly get better? How much longer can I keep carrying all of this? Those questions become louder late at night when everything around you grows quiet. You replay conversations in your mind. You replay mistakes. You replay fears about the future. And little by little, your soul becomes tired from trying to stay hopeful while secretly feeling afraid all the time. At first, you tell yourself this season will pass quickly. You believe tomorrow might finally feel different. Maybe tomorrow the pressure will lift. Maybe tomorrow the breakthrough will come. Maybe tomorrow God will answer the prayer you have been whispering through tears for so long. But then another day passes. And another. And another. And slowly, disappointment starts replacing expectation. That is when fear becomes dangerous. Not loud fear. Quiet fear. The kind that whispers things into your heart until they begin sounding believable. What if nothing changes? What if this pain never ends? What if life will always feel this heavy? Again. And again. And again. Those thoughts settle deep into the soul after enough waiting. And eventually, even small moments of peace begin feeling temporary because part of your heart is always preparing for another wave of disappointment to arrive. That is what prolonged suffering does to a person. It teaches them to expect darkness. It trains the heart to protect itself from hope. And after enough pain, even hearing positive words feels difficult because disappointment has wounded trust so deeply. Maybe that is why your heart feels tired right now. Not because you stopped believing in God completely. But because you have been waiting so long for relief that your soul no longer knows how to rest fully anymore. There are nights where tears quietly fall while nobody is watching. Nights where you whisper exhausted prayers into darkness because you no longer have strength for perfect words. Nights where all you can honestly say is, God, I need you. And maybe that simple prayer is more powerful than you realize. Because God hears exhausted prayers too. He hears the trembling voice. He hears the silent tears. He hears the moments where your heart feels too weak to keep pretending everything is okay. And right now, this message is for the person who feels emotionally worn down by life. The person who secretly wonders if things will ever truly become peaceful again. The person carrying fear quietly because they no longer know how to explain the heaviness inside them. God is saying, everything will be fine soon. Not because your pain was imaginary. Not because your suffering did not matter. Not because the waiting has been easy. But because this difficult season is not the end of your story. Even now, while you feel tired. Even now, while answers still seem far away. Even now, while your heart still feels fragile. God is still moving in places you cannot yet see. And maybe tonight, before the breakthrough arrives, before circumstances finally change, before peace fully returns, your soul needs this reminder more than anything else. You are not abandoned. You are not forgotten. And this heaviness you have been carrying forever, will not last forever. And after carrying that heaviness for so long, something inside him slowly began to collapse. Not all at once. Not in a dramatic moment where everything suddenly fell apart. It happened quietly, little by little, the way emotional exhaustion settles into a person after too many nights spent trying to survive silently. He still continued through life. Still woke up every morning. Still answered people when they spoke to him. Still tried to act like everything was under control. But deep inside, he was becoming tired in ways nobody could fully see. At first, he thought he only needed rest. He told himself this difficult season would pass soon. He believed if he stayed patient long enough, if he prayed faithfully enough, eventually God would remove the pressure and life would finally feel peaceful again. But the days kept moving forward while the heaviness inside him only grew deeper. Every disappointment stayed longer in his heart. Every unanswered prayer hurt more than before. And slowly, hope itself began feeling exhausting. That frightened him. Because there was a time when hope came naturally. Now it felt fragile. Like something that could disappear completely if one more painful thing happened. There were mornings where he opened his eyes already feeling emotionally drained before the day even began. Fear waited for him immediately. Fear about the future. Fear about finances. Fear about things never truly getting better. Even small problems felt overwhelming now because his soul had become worn down from carrying too much for too long without relief. And the worst part was how invisible it all felt. People still saw him functioning. Still moving through life. Still surviving. But they did not see the nights where he sat completely alone trying desperately not to cry because he was tired of feeling weak. They did not see how often he replayed painful memories in his mind searching for meaning inside everything that had gone wrong. They did not hear the silent conversations happening inside him every single night. What if nothing changes? What if this heaviness never leaves? What if life always feels this hard? Again. And again. And again. Those thoughts slowly became part of him. Quiet background noise following him everywhere. Even during moments that should have brought peace, part of his heart remained afraid because suffering had trained him to expect disappointment now. That is what prolonged pain does to the soul. It teaches a person to prepare emotionally for more hurt. It slowly steals the ability to fully rest. And eventually, even silence becomes painful. Especially silence from heaven. That was what wounded him most deeply. Not only the pressure itself. Not only the waiting. But the silence. Because there were nights where he prayed honestly, desperately, quietly asking God for comfort, for direction, for relief, and still nothing seemed to change immediately. And after enough waiting, silence began feeling personal. He started questioning things he never imagined he would question before. God, are you still listening? Do you still care about what I'm going through? Have you forgotten me somehow? Those thoughts terrified him because deep down he still wanted to trust God. He wanted to believe this season had purpose. He wanted to believe everything would eventually be okay. But emotionally, he was exhausted from carrying uncertainty every day without visible answers. And exhaustion changes people slowly. He became quieter around others. More emotionally distant. More withdrawn. Not because he stopped caring about people, but because he no longer knew how to explain the heaviness inside him. How do you explain emotional pain that has no visible wound? How do you explain feeling tired in your soul while still trying to survive normal life every day? So instead, he carried it silently. And silent suffering always becomes heavier over time. There were nights he lay awake staring into darkness for hours because his thoughts would not stop moving. His mind replayed every fear repeatedly until even breathing felt emotionally heavy. Sometimes he would whisper exhausted prayers into silence simply because part of him was afraid of completely losing connection with God. Please help me. That was often all he could say now. Not long prayers. Not confident prayers. Just tired ones. Because his heart no longer had energy for anything more. And still, morning would come again with the same heaviness waiting for him. The same pressure. The same uncertainty. The same silent ache sitting inside his chest. Day after day. Night after night. Until eventually, he stopped expecting life to improve soon at all. That was when the suffering reached its most dangerous point. Not when pain first appeared. But when hope started disappearing. He stopped imagining breakthrough. Stopped imagining peace. Stopped imagining himself truly happy again. Instead, survival became his only goal. One more day. One more night. One more prayer. That was all he could manage emotionally now. And survival is exhausting when it stretches on too long. There were moments where he genuinely wondered how much more his heart could carry before something inside him finally broke completely. He felt emotionally fragile all the time now. Small disappointments overwhelmed him. Quiet moments frightened him. Even good days felt temporary because deep down he expected another wave of sadness to arrive eventually. And maybe the loneliness hurt worst of all. Because pain becomes heavier when a person feels unseen inside it. People may notice your smile. They may notice your routine. But they do not always notice the hidden tears. The sleepless nights. The silent battles happening deep inside your soul. And slowly, he began feeling invisible in his suffering. But even then, even while fear and exhaustion consumed so much of his heart, something remained alive inside him. Very small. Very fragile. Almost hidden beneath all the sadness. But alive. A quiet little part of him that still whispered. Hold on. He could not explain why it remained. Because emotionally, he felt close to collapse. Mentally, he felt exhausted beyond words. Spiritually, he felt lost inside silence and waiting. And yet, something deep inside him still believed maybe this was not the end after all. Maybe the silence was not abandonment. Maybe the waiting was not meaningless. Maybe God was still near, even now, even here, even in the middle of all these hidden tears nobody else could see. And that was when the suffering became deeper than sadness. It was no longer only about the problems around him. It became something living quietly inside him every single day. The heaviness followed him everywhere now. Into every morning. Every conversation. Every silent night. He could feel it the moment he opened his eyes each day, like his soul had already become tired before life even began again. At first, he tried to fight against it. He kept telling himself things would improve soon. He forced himself to stay hopeful even when his heart already felt exhausted. He prayed harder. Tried to stay positive. Tried to believe that maybe tomorrow would finally feel different. But the waiting continued. The silence continued. And after enough disappointment, even hope started feeling painful. Because hoping while suffering is exhausting. Especially when nobody fully understands what you are carrying inside. People still saw him functioning. They still saw him surviving. But they did not see the emotional battle happening underneath everything. They did not see how many nights he sat completely alone staring into darkness while fear slowly consumed his thoughts. They did not see how often tears quietly fell after everyone else had gone to sleep. They did not see how close he was to breaking internally while still trying to appear normal externally. And slowly, loneliness became part of the suffering itself. Not because nobody cared about him. But because invisible pain is difficult to explain. How do you explain exhaustion living deep inside the soul? How do you explain feeling emotionally overwhelmed every single day while still trying to survive normal life? So instead, he stayed quiet. And quiet suffering always grows heavier. Days started blending together until time itself felt empty. Morning became night before he even noticed, because every day carried the same emotional weight. The same fear. The same uncertainty. The same silent ache sitting inside his chest no matter where he went. And nights became the hardest part. That was when everything grew louder. The memories. The regrets. The fears. Especially the fears. What if things never get better? What if this pain stays forever? What if God has gone silent toward you? Again. And again. And again. The thoughts repeated themselves endlessly until they became part of the atmosphere inside his mind. Even during moments that should have brought peace, part of his heart remained afraid, because suffering had trained him to expect disappointment now. That frightened him deeply. Because there was a time when trusting God felt natural. Now trust felt fragile. Not gone completely. Just tired. Very tired. There were moments where he wanted to pray but could barely find words anymore. His soul had become too exhausted for perfect prayers. Sometimes all he could whisper into the darkness was, "God, please." And then silence would return again. Heavy silence. The kind that presses against the heart until a person starts questioning everything. Not only their future. Not only their strength. Even their faith. He began wondering if maybe he had disappointed God somehow. Maybe he had failed in ways he could not see. Maybe the silence meant heaven had stepped away from him. He hated those thoughts, but after enough lonely nights, they became difficult to silence. And exhaustion changes the way a person sees themselves. He stopped recognizing who he used to be. There was a time when he laughed easily. A time when peace came naturally. A time when he believed difficult seasons always passed quickly. But now even joy felt distant somehow. He still smiled sometimes, but it no longer reached the deepest parts of him. He still spoke to people, but emotionally he felt far away from everyone. Almost disconnected from life itself. That scared him. Because deep suffering does not always destroy a person loudly. Sometimes it slowly empties them quietly. There were nights he sat alone wondering how much more his heart could carry before something inside him finally broke completely. He felt emotionally fragile all the time now. Small disappointments overwhelmed him. Silence overwhelmed him. Even peaceful moments felt temporary because part of him expected another wave of pain to arrive eventually. That is what prolonged suffering does. It teaches the soul to brace itself for more hurt. And after enough hurt, a person forgets what true rest even felt like before all the pain began. He missed the old version of himself. The version that trusted naturally. The version that believed God was near without constantly fighting fear. The version that woke up with hope instead of heaviness already sitting on his chest. That person felt so distant now. Almost unreachable. And realizing that broke his heart even more. Because suffering was no longer only attacking his circumstances. It was attacking his identity. Slowly convincing him he was weaker than he truly was. Slower. More fragile. More forgotten. And after enough silent nights, those lies began sounding believable. But even then, even while fear consumed so much of his heart, something still remained alive deep inside him. Small. Weak. Almost invisible beneath all the sadness. But alive. A fragile little part of him that still listened for God in the silence. A quiet little voice that still whispered. Hold on. He did not understand why it remained. Because emotionally, he felt exhausted beyond words. Mentally, he felt overwhelmed constantly. Spiritually, he felt lost inside waiting and unanswered prayers. And yet, something inside him refused to completely give up. Even after all the tears. Even after all the sleepless nights. Even after all the moments where he thought he could not survive another day emotionally. That small hope remained. And maybe that was because God was still there too. Watching every hidden tear. Listening to every exhausted prayer. Holding him together quietly while he thought he was falling apart completely. Because sometimes, when suffering reaches its deepest point, when a person becomes too tired to keep pretending, when tears fall silently in darkness and hope feels fragile beyond words. God is closer than it feels. Not absent. Not indifferent. Closer. Working quietly in hidden places inside the soul. Preparing healing before the wounded heart can recognize it. Preparing peace before circumstances change. Preparing transformation in the exact place where the person believed everything was ending. And though he could not see it yet, heaven had never stopped moving through the silence. God, tonight I come before you with a tired heart. Not the kind of tiredness that sleep can fix. Not the kind that disappears after a quiet day or a little rest. I mean the kind of exhaustion that settles deep inside the soul after carrying pain for too long. The kind that follows me into every room and waits for me every morning before the day even begins. And honestly, I do not know how to carry it anymore. I have tried to stay strong for so long. Tried to keep believing things would get better. Tried to keep smiling around people even while something inside me slowly became heavier every single day. But tonight, I no longer want to pretend that I am okay. Because I'm tired, God. So tired. Tired of fear. Tired of waiting. Tired of wondering when life will finally feel peaceful again. There are nights where silence becomes overwhelming. Nights where my thoughts grow louder than my faith. Nights where I replay every disappointment, every unanswered prayer, every hidden tear until my heart feels too heavy to breathe calmly anymore. And sometimes, after enough lonely nights, fear starts sounding believable. What if nothing changes? What if this pain never leaves? What if I stay stuck in this darkness forever? Again. And again. And again. Those thoughts exhaust me, God. I try to fight them. I try to stay hopeful. But some days, hope itself feels heavy now. Some days I feel emotionally worn down from carrying invisible battles nobody else fully understands. People see me functioning. They see me continuing life. But they do not see the heaviness inside my chest. They do not see the tears I hide from everyone else. They do not see how close I sometimes feel to breaking internally. But you see it. At least. I want to believe you do. Because right now, more than anything, I need to know I am not suffering alone. God, if you are still close to me tonight, please let me feel it somehow. Not through dramatic signs. Not through immediate answers. Just through peace. Even small peace. Enough peace to quiet my heart for a moment. Enough peace to remind me I have not been abandoned. Because lately, the silence has frightened me. There were times when trusting you felt easier. Times when prayer felt alive. Times when I believed with confidence that everything would eventually work out. But now, after all the waiting, after all the disappointment, after all the hidden tears, my heart feels fragile. And I hate admitting that. I hate how tired I have become. I hate how fear keeps returning every night. I hate how difficult it has become to rest emotionally. But tonight, I choose honesty instead of pretending. So here is my heart exactly as it is. Tired. Afraid. Overwhelmed. Still hoping, but struggling. Still praying, but exhausted. Still reaching toward you, even while fighting fear constantly. And somehow, even through all this pain, part of me still believes you are listening. So please, stay close to me in this season. Stay close when silence feels heavy. Stay close when my thoughts begin pulling me into fear again. Stay close when I wake up tomorrow carrying the same emotional weight I carried today. And when I no longer have strength to keep pretending I am strong, remind me gently that I was never meant to survive this season alone. God, heal the places inside me nobody else can see. Heal the exhaustion living deep inside my soul. Heal the sadness I keep hiding behind normal conversations and forced smiles. Heal the fear that keeps stealing my peace every night. Because some days, I do not even recognize myself anymore. I miss the version of me that trusted naturally. The version of me that rested peacefully. The version of me that believed difficult seasons would pass quickly. But now I feel emotionally worn thin. And I need you more than ever. Please remind my heart that silence does not mean abandonment. Remind me that you still see every hidden tear. Every sleepless night. Every exhausted prayer. Every moment where I almost gave up emotionally but somehow kept going anyway. Nothing was invisible to you. Nothing. And maybe that truth is what my soul needs most tonight. Not perfect answers. Not immediate breakthrough. Just the reassurance that heaven still sees me. Even here. Even tired. Even afraid. Even emotionally broken. God. I surrender the weight I have been carrying for too long. The pressure to stay strong. The pressure to control everything because I am terrified of falling apart if I let go. The pressure to keep pretending I am okay when deep down I feel exhausted beyond words. I place it all before you tonight. The fear. The sadness. The waiting. The uncertainty. The tears nobody else saw. I place all of it into your hands because I no longer know how to carry it by myself. And even though part of me still feels afraid, another part of me believes you are still here in this silence with me. Watching. Listening. Holding me together quietly. So tonight, before I sleep, before another difficult day begins again tomorrow, let this truth settle deep into my soul. I am not abandoned. I am not forgotten. And these silent tears falling in darkness are not falling unseen. And then, slowly, after all the silent suffering, after all the nights where tears quietly fell in darkness, after all the moments where his heart felt too exhausted to keep pretending, God finally began speaking to him in a way deeper than words. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But gently. Like light slowly entering a room that had been dark for far too long. Nothing around him changed immediately at first. The same problems still existed. The same uncertainty still surrounded his future. The same unanswered questions remained. But something inside him had finally reached the point where he could no longer survive by relying only on his own strength. And maybe, that was exactly where transformation was meant to begin. Because sometimes God allows a person to become completely exhausted emotionally so they finally stop depending on control and start resting fully in Him instead. That night, he sat alone again like so many nights before. But this time felt different somehow. He was too tired to force hope anymore. Too tired to pretend he understood what heaven was doing. Too tired to fight every fearful thought constantly. So instead of trying to hold himself together, he simply sat in silence before God exactly as he was. Broken. Tired. Afraid. And, strangely, for the first time in a very long while, he stopped hiding those feelings from God. No perfect prayers. No forced faith. Just honesty. And in that quiet moment, something shifted deep inside him. Not outside. Inside. A peace slowly settled over his heart. Not complete peace. Not the kind that instantly removes every problem. A quieter kind. A deeper kind. The kind that reaches the soul before circumstances ever change. And suddenly, he realized something that changed the way he saw everything. God had seen every silent tear. Every single one. The tears he cried while nobody was watching. The tears he wiped away before anyone noticed. The tears that came from exhaustion, loneliness, fear, disappointment, uncertainty, and waiting. None of them had been invisible. Not one. That realization broke something open inside him emotionally. Because for so long, he thought silence meant abandonment. He thought unanswered prayers meant heaven had stepped away from him. He thought suffering meant he was forgotten somehow. But now, sitting there with tears quietly falling again, he understood something far deeper than answers. God had been there the entire time. Watching. Listening. Holding him together quietly while he thought he was falling apart completely. And once that truth entered his heart, everything slowly began changing. Not instantly. Not perfectly. But deeply. The silence no longer felt empty anymore. It felt sacred. The waiting no longer felt meaningless. It felt purposeful. Even the suffering itself began looking different through his eyes. At first he believed this painful season was destroying him. But now, he realized God had been rebuilding him in hidden places comfort never could reach. The suffering exposed fears hidden deep inside him. The loneliness revealed how much he had depended on people to feel emotionally secure. The waiting stripped away his illusion of control. And the silence taught him how to seek God even without immediate answers. Little by little, transformation began. The fear that once controlled his thoughts started losing power over him. Not because life suddenly became easy, but because now he understood something stronger. Then fear itself. God was still with him. Even in silence. Even in suffering. Even during the nights where his soul felt shattered. That truth steadied him in ways nothing else could. He stopped waking up every morning expecting disappointment. Stopped believing every delay meant rejection. Stopped assuming difficult seasons were proof his story was ending in defeat. Instead, he started moving through life differently. Calmer. Softer. More grounded. Because now he carried something deeper than temporary emotions. He carried the certainty that heaven had never abandoned him. And slowly, that certainty transformed every part of him. He became more patient during uncertainty because he now understood that God often works quietly long before visible breakthrough appears. He became gentler with people because suffering taught him how many hidden battles human hearts carry silently. He stopped judging weakness quickly because he remembered how close he himself once felt to emotional collapse. And perhaps most importantly, he stopped fearing silence the same way. Because now he understood something powerful. Silence is not always absence. Sometimes silence is where God does his deepest work. There were moments now where peace appeared unexpectedly in places fear once lived. Small moments at first. Quiet moments. The kind most people overlook. A calm feeling during prayer. Strength arriving on days he thought he would emotionally break. Tiny reminders that heaven had been moving all along even when nothing made sense. And the more he noticed those quiet mercies, the stronger trust became inside him. Not forced trust. Not desperate trust. Real trust. The kind born through suffering. The kind that survives silence. The kind that remains standing after disappointment tried repeatedly to destroy it. He realized now that God had not wasted any part of his pain. Not the tears. Not the sleepless nights. Not the loneliness. Not the exhaustion. Every painful moment had shaped him into someone deeper than before. Someone stronger than fear. Someone capable of surviving darkness without losing faith completely. And one day, looking back at everything he survived, he barely recognized the broken version of himself who once believed life would never feel peaceful again. Because now, even though life was still imperfect, his soul was no longer drowning in fear the same way. Something inside him had become steady. Stronger. More rooted in God than in circumstances. That was the true miracle. Not only changed situations. A transformed heart. And suddenly, he understood why God did not remove the pain immediately. Because if every difficult season had ended instantly, he never would have discovered this deeper faith. If every prayer had been answered immediately, he never would have learned how to trust without visible proof. If life had remained comfortable, he never would have discovered how close God truly stays during human weakness. And now, standing at the end of that painful chapter, one truth became clearer than anything else. Not one silent tear had been wasted. Not one exhausted prayer had gone unheard. Not one lonely night had been faced alone. Because while he thought he was slowly breaking apart, God had quietly been rebuilding him from the inside out. And that realization changed everything forever. Now, even when difficult seasons come again someday, he will never face them the same way. Because once a person discovers that God stayed beside them through every hidden tear, every sleepless night, every season of silence, fear never fully owns their heart again. Once a person realizes heaven never looked away even during their weakest moments, they stop viewing suffering as the end. They begin seeing it differently. Not as abandonment. As preparation. Preparation for deeper faith. Preparation for stronger peace. Preparation for a life transformed by the very pain that once threatened to destroy them. And standing there with a healed soul where fear once lived, he finally understood something powerful enough to change everything. God was never absent in the silence. He was closest there all along.